There you go. Should be good to go.
You live on streaming? All right.
Lights on, not on.
We're there on and we're good to go.
Now they're on. Good evening. Good evening, everybody. So this is October 10, 2024, Open Space Committee meeting. Roll call.
All right. Member Austin Goldstein,
Here.
member Budrako,
Here.
member Conway,
Here.
member Page,
I'm here.
Chair Pasquarelli,
Here.
member Hugh, absent, member Holness.
Here.
Okay,
Got a quorum.
we do. We have a quorum. So the agenda is as
No changes?
discussed. Okay. Public comments. Any members of the public?
There is no one online, Mr. Chairman.
Do we have a member of the public in the room who always wants to speak, or we?
So,
Or we?
Member of the public yields this time.
All right, so no public comments at this time. Approval of the minutes. So if everybody's had a chance to look at the minutes from July 11th, does anyone have any issues with or questions about the minutes?
I make a motion to accept the minutes. This is Commissioner Conway.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that passes unanimously, the minutes. And we have, next on the agenda, new business. So we will be discussing, the creation or the,
Yep.
opportunity to create a natural resource inventory for Newington.
so I'll bring up because I had printouts here, but this is something. It's not the right one. Come on, Zoom.
Can we find it or you?
I should be able to, I have them up, but it's not letting me share correctly. I love Zoom. Okay, for those, and I can email this out to the members who aren't here right now. So what we did is we found a kind of fact sheet for tools for conservation. This is talking about a natural resource inventory. This came up during one of the previous meetings when we were discussing really how do we apply the selection criteria. So the committee came up with a selection criteria that was adopted by the council. And then when looking through it, trying to create a GIS project and a product, something that we could really use to actually analyze parcels, to do it when something came in on the fly, when something was available, we were able to have the data at hand and just adjust the parameters for any type of grant that came in. One thing that I really was seeing is a lack of qualitative data about the resources themselves. We know that there's wetlands, we know there's a stream, we know that there's an NDDB quadrangle in the area, but we don't know really what is there. And that takes an extra level of effort. So this was an item that was discussed, so it was put on the agenda as a new item, new business item to think about where do we go as a town and where does the committee see the town going or recommend for a natural resource inventory. There are multiple different ways this is kind of gone about it. What I gave you here for the handout, and again, I will email that along to others who are not here, is that, some areas, again, this Hudson River Estuary Program, it was a big push by the state. It's multiple different towns have very big natural resource inventories. And I believe the one from Newcastle that came out of this, it's a total of 105 pages. So these things can be very, very detailed documents talking about streams, the classifications of the habitat, the biodiversity, the riparian habitats, ponds, wetlands, everything you have, or forest, looking at all of these aspects of what's out there. But for us to really make an informed decision about what open space, not only because we have open space for recreation, but what open space for conservation of resources and actually increasing the quality of the resources that we have in Newington where are our opportunities? And that's the information we're really lacking to make that decision. Now, as a one-off, if property does come available or, there is that, they would have to do the study at that time. You're talking about a lot of lag time. And most people, when they're looking to sell a property, they're not looking for contingencies that are going to push this things out 6 months from when they're trying to sell it. They're trying to sell it for if they're altruistic, great, but we don't have that too often. But if they are trying to sell the property, they're trying to sell it to the most qualified bidder with the least amount of contingencies who can close as fast as possible. It's real estate 101 just to move along and get it sold. So without having this kind of data in there, I'm really unable to kind of drill down and say, okay, what's the real value? We know there's wetlands, okay, but is this more of a drainage area more than anything else? Okay, its functions are limited. Maybe development on that parcel isn't the end of the world because it wouldn't impact it. Is this something that has a high quality, riverine quality to it? Is there something that development or, a change to the property could threaten the larger system? That's what we need to know to add that level of detail into the analysis when we're looking at properties. So I kind of put this out there as an idea of saying, okay, is this something that the committee wants to go in that direction? And if you do, is this something that you would want to recommend to either be put in a future year's budget? This is something it's beyond the scope of, what staff has time for. And actually, you do need some more expertise. You need a biologist. We don't have a biologist on staff. That's not something typically towns have. So we need that expert advice, expert opinions, and expertise to be able to bring us to that level of understanding. What are we really looking at, and what's the value added? So that they're kind of putting it out there. I'm welcome to hear from any committee members on what direction you're looking to go in. I believe, we were talking at the last meeting. I think it was the last meeting we were talking about this. That yes, there was one done for in the Cedar Mountain area when the Toll Brothers proposal came in, but it really just looked at that one property.
Right.
So yeah, we have information for that property alone. So that's understood. But that's a starting point where we don't have it for the rest of the resources in Newington.
There'll probably be one also isn't George Logan doing the 44 Kits Lane? Isn't he doing one?
Yes, yeah. So he's been contracted as a third-party reviewer. That luckily the Conservation Commission does have that in their regulations where they can call for that. So, to look at that little more detail about what that site has. But again, we're talking about a small and that one, other than the, large hill behind it and having that, part of the mix of ridgeline, it's not a ridgeline per se in the protection zone, but it is rocky in some areas. It is a continuation of that spine that runs down from Cedar Mountain, all the way down, in our border on Weathersfield. You can just, that's our main thing is when you look at Newington and Weathersfield, the topography change when you come into Newington, you're going down into more of a different type of area. And that's why we have a lot of wetlands.
Right.
And that's why we have a lot of these streams and that cause us flooding issues. It's just kind of the way that the bowl that Newington is shaped. So I'm happy to hear from committee members on your thoughts on this. If you've, I think there were some committee members said they were going to maybe reach out to other organizations. I know that the, the coastal one, I'm trying to remember their name, unfortunately escaped me, out of Middletown.
Yeah, Dick Hogan House.
Yeah, the resources that they have provided some. The scale of an entire town project would probably be beyond the scale.
The ERT, the Environmental Review Team.
Yeah.
They actually did Cedar Mountain twice. And George Logan did an evaluation as well.
Well, just on the topic of Cedar Mountain, did they actually do an inventory of the whole area? Or was this just specific to these development?
It was just specific to the application at hand.
Okay.
So they did not really go outside the scope of those boundaries.
Would it be, given that this does need either a budgetary line item or we need to apply for maybe funding or some other, maybe there's some other bodies that support that. Would it be reasonable to want to start with the mountain area itself as like a smaller project, since it's sort of always the big thing that we're talking about and we're looking at? Or does that not make sense? Would you just try to get the whole project done?
I think that would probably be a useful resource for when we're compiling all the data and putting it together. So, we could have that as an example and put that out there for information. We can pull together those documents for the next meeting, or if we continue to discuss this and just say, okay, this is what we're looking for to understand what's been done. And to say, is this enough information for us to move forward, or do we need something even more than what was done
It
up there?
sounds like it wasn't done for the whole
Yeah.
area.
It was not. So, and then the other thing that you would have to consider is if they're gonna be boots on the ground, there's gonna have to be permissions because the town doesn't own any of that property.
Okay.
And they may not, knowing what we may wanna do, they may like, no, you're not coming to the property. I don't know.
Well, then maybe I'm not understanding how in a practical sense, how the inventory is arrived at. Because the whole town is owned, I mean, most of it's not public land.
Yep, a lot of it, and that's when we'd have to dive into those particulars. For example, a lot of it does happen on when Meriden, for example, down there, they had an NRI working group, but it was outside of the town itself. So it was citizens who got together and were working on this, and they literally were going out and geocaching, different stands of trees, or if they found something that looked like a vernal pool, or there were certain species, they were out there taking pictures with their phone, recording it, and it was a citizen-led effort. I don't think that has culminated into a final report, because those things take, if you have volunteer and you're working on a townwide project, that's going to take years to complete. It's just kind of the nature of it, but there has to be, a working group behind it who's going to keep that process going.
Is there a way that, some of the colleges, can have interns do something like this?
Sure, there probably is.
For
I mean,
credit, for,
Yeah, I'm
credit
sure
as
it's
one
like
of their.
CCSU has
high school?
programs,
Well, no,
UConn.
I don't think high school, it would have to be, colleges or whatever, maybe they'd be interested in using it as a term project or something.
Yeah, I think that, it would be to have them, so as a term project, I think, if you had identified areas, like say, a townwide one would be probably too much for a project like that, just thinking about, and that would be a grad level thesis project.
Yeah, it'd be more of a
Yeah.
capstone project.
Yeah, capstone to do
The whole town.
the entire town. It probably would be a group of students working together on it. And whether that, is an opportunity, we can look into that. But, they could be a force multiplier that if we do bring people in and have a,
Occupied area.
have a biologist on that, it's that intern, a little bit of learning experience for them too, but also more people in the field, geocaching, taking pictures and recording what's really out there so it can be put into a report.
Grants,
Yeah.
I mean, have we approached?
I haven't seen too many in Connecticut. It's one of these ones where New York, again, for the Hudson River, it's when you have estuaries and when you have like Chesapeake Bay. This is all over in Virginia, Maryland, everything. They have a concerted effort and funding from their legislature to clean up an area. So yes, that was incorporated as part of that. I haven't seen anything from the state that really has pushed towards this direction.
Can we ask, what's her name? I forget what her
Sonia.
name is. Can we ask?
Yes, we can ask Sonia.
I mean, we could also see if there's been any kind of level of interest at CROG, and they could get their own bids, and then we might be able to piggyback off something like that. I don't know if they've discussed that at all.
Yeah, but it is, again, it's a potential expenditure, it's a potential budget item, and it is also staff time to do that, because any project we do has to have someone from staff who's kind of shepherding it.
I think you're right, because we've identified areas of interest, or we have that whole list of the, what we consider open space. But then if somebody says, well, why do you think the wetlands, off of Cedar Street are important? I don't know what lives in there, but I'm sure there's something that lives in there.
You gotta determine the functional value
Yeah,
of that wetland.
exactly. And some people don't even even the waterfall. Yeah, it's pretty, but there's really some significance to that. There's another waterfall in town that a lot of people don't
Yep.
even know about. We have these resources and we don't even know about it, let alone what the value is or what lives there.
Is it safe to say, and if somebody who's online would like to speak, please, is it safe to say that eventually we're going to have to update the plan of conservation and development in, I don't know, whatever, 5-6 years? It'll be coming up
Yep,
at some point.
2030.
Is this something that would be useful to have
it would make that chapter far more robust.
Yeah.
Than it is right now. Right now, it's pretty broad,
Yeah,
when it talks about the resources.
that seems like something that we should find a way to tackle either in a small part or a larger part. And I'm happy to contact CROG. I'm the CROG liaison, so I can ask them if there's funding opportunities. Is that what?
And, you know, I don't know if other towns have asked them, you know, like
Yeah.
same thing
Yeah.
we're kind of doing.
Yeah.
And if
Okay.
they get enough towns asking, yeah, they'll put something out to bid and say, okay, we have somebody that we can use,
Yep.
you know, kind of like a state bid kind of situation.
Yep, and that, you know, that helps out, you know, a little selfishly from staff point of view too, is yes, when you have more of a regional approach to it, you have CROG who comes in and, you know, hires the consultant, pays the consultant, and we don't have to take up town resources in that part of the administration, which is useful for us.
Worth a shot.
Go ahead, Mitch.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thanks. I
Tanner.
agree with the regional approach and working with CROG. And if you said this, I'm sorry, but are there other towns in Connecticut who have demonstrated an effort in this area and we could learn from them and we could maybe pair up with them? Maybe you said that already. I'm sorry.
I did not delve too much into Connecticut. I didn't find anything right off the bat. It was kind of a last minute thing. I was to find this, so I'm unsure.
Yep, and we can research that. Again, I haven't seen too many in Connecticut as far as what's out there. I think there are some, and we can pull those in as examples. As I said, well, Meriden again was example because I was down there when they were doing it.
Yeah.
And you know, when it was, you know, some concerned citizens and people who attended our wetlands meetings, attended all the other meetings, and had a very strong affinity for trying to figure out what actually resources were there. They took it upon themselves. But again, as I said, that process is hard to do, especially for a group of volunteers to do on their own.
Yeah.
But yes, we can definitely take a look into that and see some good examples out there. And again, it's talking, I think that's a great idea to talk to CROG to see if they've even heard, you know, if other towns have approached them, they can generate a project out of this and look for funding, you know, through their funding, look through grants that they could get as a regional approach. Because there might be more grants you can get. The larger the impact, the more appetite there is for people out there funding these types of things.
Right, especially talking about the mountain, that could also be combined with Weathersfield.
Mhm.
Is there anything that we should be talking about tonight about this to move this forward, or is it fine just to kind of keep doing the research? I mean, I'm not sure how anyone feels about presenting this idea to town council, or if it's too soon. We want to kind of get to a little bit more legwork.
I kind of think it's too soon, quite
Okay.
frankly. I mean, it's a great idea, and I
Mhm.
can't imagine anybody else
Yeah.
at this point. But the first question is gonna be, who's gonna do it? How much is it gonna cost? The same questions we're kind of
Yeah.
asking, so.
Fair enough.
But that's not to say that, you know, we have to wait another quarter to have a meeting on this if we have information.
Sarah has her hand raised as well.
Yeah.
Sarah?
Tanner, sorry.
That's okay. I know who you meant. I agree with that. I think that it should be a regional approach and that it probably is too soon because we don't have our ducks in rows and there might be opportunities with piggybacking onto other towns or other groups that we don't know about yet. So I think it's just a little too premature to bring it up to town.
Yeah, and I would say from staff point of view too, that if the committee does find things out there that are interesting on this too, and does have any availability to research and that we do appreciate that. Eric and I do, that anything that, you know, you see out there to say, hey, you know, this is a great example, or this is another approach another town took, because we can sit there and do the research as well. It takes up other staff time that we have to take from other projects.
I mean, maybe even some of the local land trusts have some
That's what
kind
I
of
was thinking. The
insight.
Berlin Land Trust is very interested in the Trap Rock Ridge,
Right.
so.
Maybe they have utilized something or, you know, I'm sure they have connections to specialists and whatnot.
And then on our conservation commission, Alan Paskovich does vernal pools, I believe,
He studies them a lot, yes.
so he might have some knowledge of, I don't know, groups that might be interested in doing inventories like this.
Some in like environmental groups or some,
But I think, I think this it's a good thing to get accomplished in some fashion, so I think.
is this something that we need to vote on as a group in your mind?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, I would think it's, at this point, I think the feeling that, yes, it's a little, there's still more research that's need to be done, and we assist it, and we appreciate any assistance with the research. But once we kind of formulate something, it's a matter of whether it's because he's in the room with Jonathan, whether it's a memo to Jonathan from the committee saying, this is a priority for the open space committee, that this is be done. And once we figure out more along the lines of, okay, what's free, what's not, what are we really looking at with estimates? I've talked to a biologist, and, there's interest out there, but until we really define the scope of what we're looking at, that'll of course change the
Particularly
cost.
yeah.
Yeah, dramatically. If you're doing an entire town thing, it's not a, $5,000 project.
No,
It's a bit more than that, but I don't have the exact
you
estimate.
can, I'm assuming you can also just be strategic about
Mhm.
what areas of the town you really want
Right, because you can,
analyzed.
you can look at aerial photography, you
Yeah.
can bring up our wetland layer and put on top, so right off the bat, those areas, and then you can identify other areas off of aerials that, biologists and stuff say, hey, this might be a wetland, you don't even have mapped, this should be looked at, and different things like that, because that's what they do, and that's probably how they would begin the project anyway.
Right.
It's just aerial
Targeting.
mapping.
Yeah.
We'll look at our, what do you already know about? Well, here's our mapped wetlands, and then compare it to what the state, or FEMA has, DEP for wetlands and stuff, and then they'll start to formulate a plan and the areas that they would look at. And if you wanted to just concentrate on certain areas, that might be one of those options where you do it in phases.
Mhm.
When was the last time our wetlands maps were updated? Because when we go to some of these meetings, it's like the developer's map doesn't match
Mhm.
what we have, and how.
They
is
were
that-
they were established in the early 70s from aerial photography, and they've just kind of remained the same over time. Applicants hire their own soil scientists, and some choose to do a map amendment and actually move the line, some don't, but we know where that line is and you can document it.
But they don't change dramatically, do they?
In some cases they do. I mean, again, you're going off of aerial photography in the 1970s where, oh, that looks like a wetland pocket. And
Mhm.
today, through development or whatever else, it may not really exist or be
Oh.
much more reduced.
Yeah, and there's other opportunities where, yes, from the 70s, development has increased in this part of the town. Runoff has increased in its intensity towards another area. More water is then being stored in a previous wetland, and the wetland boundaries over time can morph in other areas. So the undeveloped areas sometimes expand in their wetlands just to, as a natural function to handle the stormwater that originally was flowing from a development that came in the 80s, especially in 90s, before we really went more into, now we have stricter standards. The stormwater quality manual went from 1 inch to 1.3 something inches. So that's the first flush. So when you look at that, the newest update increased the amount you have to detain on the property by 30%.
That's a lot.
And some of those unintended consequences were these old, detention ponds and stuff have actually turned into a wetland over time. They may not have been 20 years ago, but
Well, you mentioned about,
Yeah.
you mentioned about, any help you can get or whatever. Is there anything that any of us can do?
Yep. So I would recommend that, if you are looking around, it's one of those, some things you're not too interested in is on TV or something like that, and you're kind of searching around and poking through other natural resource inventories. If you see something that's part of it, like, wow, I really like this aspect of it, that will help us hone in on what we're really looking to do. Because it's very broad. As a 100-page document is a lot of stuff. What are we looking for? Because we might be only looking for a little bit slightly different aspects to build onto it, but what's the most important criteria for this? And we can take a look at what we've adopted for the acquisition criteria and think about that while looking at the inventories and be like, okay, yeah, no, this is one of our criteria and this would give us the information. I think that would be the most useful thing. And of course, the discussion with Krog, if you wouldn't mind having that, I would
No,
appreciate that.
I'll reach out to, Jacob and, who was on the, here when we talked to the Berlin Land Trust? Who we, and Sandra, and one of you guys spoke to them?
Yeah, we went to one of their meetings.
Okay, so if one of you,
They came actually. to
they
one of
did
our
come,
meetings.
yes, a great presentation.
Right,
That was excellent.
okay, I could.
If you have his contact, the fellow who came,
Okay.
I mean,
Just
just to
say-
ask them,
If they are aware of something.
would they like to give us some money to fund this project? No, I mean, well, how does, I mean, you never know that they have, it's very impressive what that Berlin Land
Right,
Trust
and
has
they have
done, so obviously,
contacts and-
yeah,
yeah.
and they're very close by.
No, and you know, adds that extra layer, because, you know, for example, you know, we're looking at working with Resilient Connecticut, Circa, and Krog on flood studies. Well, with flood studies, you're looking at the same area, but typically the flood studies don't go into the biodiversity on that, because they're kind of more narrowly focused.
Mhm.
Because so we have things like that, but this adds on top of it. To add a, you know, resource inventory to a flood study, you can get a little bit of information, but that morphs it into another one, that these have to be these separate projects that really look at it. To do one holistic project, you know, you're kind of creating a, you know, three-headed monster just of a project, and it's hard to manage and figure out what you're looking at.
Excellent. Any more questions or discussion about the natural resource inventory item? All right, so if there isn't, we can go to, the next item on the agenda, which is old business, open space commission priorities and future work discussion.
Yep, so this is an item that's pretty much stays on the agenda,
Yep.
Until we replace it with something else. But this is really looking at what is the, other than the, as we talked about, the natural resource inventory, which I think came out of the last discussion as a priority. What other priorities, what does the open space committee really want to be looking at? And this is that kind of catch-all item to have
Yep.
those discussions under.
Right, I mean, we only meet quarterly, so if there's some things that have come up and that you've been thinking about, or questions you've had about anything in, whether it's on, you know, parcel questions or anything like that, this would be the time we could talk about it.
I think this two, that elephants in the room are still the Cedar Crest property and then the Hartford Hospital
Yes.
property, but there's been no movement on either, so there's really.
No, there isn't, and I don't know if anyone here, I mean, I know for sure that Gail and Mitch are up to date because they're on town council, but maybe there is another member who would like an update on anything that's transpired with Cedar Crest. Do you mind, Paul, going into just a little, I mean, if anyone could use an update on
Yep.
what
so
happened?
I think the best way to look at it, of course, there was and I don't know if you've had the chance to look at it. And again, anyone who watches this video afterwards, I kind of plugged it at TPZ too. That I did go to council and give a kind of overview of Cedar Crest, just kind of what's been done in the past. You know, it is a large property that the state did give the town 10 acres previously. And that there's an 18-acre conservation easement that was an act passed by the legislature that originally, written by the DEP, the report in 2013 suggested that it be given to the town from the DEP. The final act that came out was, well, the town gets an easement over it. So yes, it is a conservation easement, which is great. There is some still process that's involved in that. Again, it was passed by act, but getting it fulfilled to its final, recorded in the land records, that level, there's still a little work that needs to be done. But that is a large chunk of that property, of the undeveloped property. So when you look at it, there really isn't that much of that property in the area that's undeveloped that is not subject to either that has been, is the town's already with the 10 acres or is subject to that 18-acre easement. So we're really talking about, you know, the first right of refusal is for that 10 acres. That includes the 5, they call them cottages, houses, whatever you want to call them at the top. up there, and it's just that small portion that's immediately adjacent to the Balf Quarry. So that's what's in front of council right now. Again, the process that the state uses is pretty much, here's our number.
Right.
We're offering it to you. It's your first right of refusal.
Right.
Say yes, or we'll put it out there. The town can, of course, participate in any RFP process for purchase of the property in the future, but it isn't something that comes along with, here's all the assessment of the property. That's not the level of information that's given. It's kind of like, okay, 10 acres, do you want it or not?
Right.
This is your shot to say, okay, now, or do you want to, be part of the process later?
Right.
So that's kind of the process going right now in front of council. Other than that, really to look at it is, part of what I was talking about is that there's the area in Weathersfield that's immediately on the other side of the quarry on Russell Road. What I found so far is I still need to do a little digging in Weathersfield land records, but I did get the last agreement deed that was filed between Weathersfield and them, and I did not see any language in it regarding conservation of that property. So that property is owned by both on the other side of Russell Road. So you have the quarry, and then you have that large area on the other side. And I can bring up a map. Probably would be the best thing to do. Let's see. I don't even know if our GIS will.
Is that where those maintenance buildings are for the hospital? I think they were
Some of them
maintenance
are.
buildings.
Your map might be better.
Yeah, it won't show the parcel lines in the adjoining in Weathersfield, but I can give you an idea. All right. And this will make it easier to understand. So what you have is, and I'll just highlight the areas because this is what I was talking about. So this is the 10-acre parcel that was deeded to the town. Again, this parcel has a restriction on the deed where it can only be used for passive recreation. If the town uses it for anything else, it reverts to the state of Connecticut. So that's how they transferred it to us. That's in the deed. So that's that one property. Because the property previously was all, this is actually owned by Balf right here. It was all this line coming around, joining Balf all along Mountain Road, and then along the bottom. So this property actually Balf, so yeah, so it kind of cut in on this property line. So what the state did is they cut out these parcels, they retained this parcel right here, and they have their property on it. They retained this small little parcel down here, gave this 10 acres for administrative costs, $1,000 to the town. And then there's an 18-acre conservation parcel, which kind of follows, if you look at the cursor, it cuts in tight against the Balf property, and then it comes down, and it pretty much comes down in this area of the property. This is where buildings were previously demolished. So you can kind of see the developed footprint. Well, where you have,
Excuse
these
me,
are the,
Are you sharing something on screen?
yes, it's showing up here. Is it
For
not
some
showing
reason,
up?
I'm not seeing anything, but I might be the only one online who's
If you
not
go
seeing
up
it.
to view options, switch over from shared screens from Eric to Paul. That's how I
Yeah.
get to view it.
That's what I did.
Okay. Thank you.
Nope. So yeah, we'll make sure when we share, you'll hit stop share.
Do
Okay,
it
so
automatic.
these are the 5 houses that they're talking about, and that 10-acre parcel is really pretty much just that they're offering. They're the right of first refusal is just pretty much kind of around here, just the houses themselves, not much of any of this land right here. Again, the future of that property has not really been shared. This is kind of their first test of the market to see for those 10 acres, what could happen with it for them selling the property. So when you look at kind of the overall, we have Balf property, Balf, you have the quarry, and this is the property I was talking about. It's actually a very large property that Weathersfield currently has their leaf composting site on, but the rest of this kind of behind here is owned by Balf. It has a good amount of wetland system in the middle of it. but trying to trace down the kind of documents in the Weathersfield side to see if there was any restrictions on this land. Again, I found that transfer. There wasn't anything that I could see in that deed. Me and Chris Abidio reviewed it to see what was in there. There's an associated map that I was looking for, so kind of to chase that down. Just because when you look at this whole area, and this is kind of the, man, it is starting to give you guys vertigo. There we go. When you look at how this is laid out and what space is available, you have the area that is the easement, the 10 acres of the town, and then is there a possibility for a connection across? So that's why I'm looking into that research.
But you
But-
said that was Weathersfield's, or
This is
Ball's property?
Weathersfield and owned by Balf.
It's on, oh, so it's
It's
Ball's
in
property.
Weathersfield, owned by Balf.
What's the property that Weathersfield was able to, or had a right of first refusal? Wasn't there some state?
So I didn't have the exact map, but I believe it was
Where that
these
building-
right here. This kind of goes in as a parcel. So,
So that's state land.
correct. They have this and this is the old powerhouse. So the state has this side as well. And then, as we know, the rest of it with the hospital and then this either, I've heard it's either a nurse's building or it was an administrative building. I've heard different people call it different things, but those are the two large remaining buildings on site and then the houses. So that's kind of that process going through, but just that history of, you know, the state has given Newington some land here in the past, the 10 acres, for a nominal cost. But they're offering this part of the land, just 10 acres up here for $1 million.
Commissioner Conway has her hand raised.
Bernadette?
Put her hands down now.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I just have a question about the Cedar Crest property that they offered right of first refusal. How much time does the town have to consider on that before we make a decision and let them know our decision, or do they have a deadline that's looming over?
Yeah, it is a looming deadline and 24th, October 24th. I was gonna say 3rd, so I'm close. So yeah, the deadline is October 24th.
I have
And
Weathersfield's
the-
ads up.
Yeah, you wanna share Weathersfield? Yes? And I'll stop sharing.
And the homes that are up there, the cottages or the buildings on there, they have not been remediated at all. Could you just give a little more information about that?
Yep, so we have
Because I
no
think there are some
information.
buildings up there,
Yes.
but I
There are
don't
the
know the
5.
condition they're in.
Here, I'll stop sharing. Yeah, there are the 5 cottages up there. They're currently boarded up. And we do not know the condition. There has been no information supplied by the state, and I don't think that they've gone in and done an assessment on those properties either.
So I suspect, like Paul was talking about, this is kind of the parcel that was offered to Weathersfield, so these other buildings are.
How many acres
It's
is that?
small, that's only 3.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
and I think they were cutting it out
Cutting it,
too.
okay.
Do we know what Weathersfield's interest is?
They're not gonna. They rejected
They
it.
rejected it? What was the price?
I don't know actually what the
Yeah,
price was.
Well, I would presume if it was $1 million for 10 acres for us, I guess it's 3 acres. Yes.
Okay,
Yep, so that's kind of where that is. Again, that's it's in front of the council right now, and you know, and just looking at it, it's kind of noted that yes, the first right of refusal is a process. It's actually a statutory process. This is not something that, you know, it's not a policy. This is actually something that's in state statutes. The process is laid out, and they're following the language of the process of the statute. And there's nothing that, you know, precludes the town in the future from looking at it, but then that's a larger policy decision and a larger decision to go through council on, because it, you know, it's $1 million is a significant amount of money.
can you tell them what the assessed value was? Wasn't it 700 something?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's-
So they're
That was
asking,
just at the just the cottage.
Yes.
Assessed value, just the cottages excluding the land.
Yeah,
So we could come out to about $1 million.
yep, and I just want to make sure that people along can hear us too. I know we're having a discussion out in the audience. Mitch and could you hear us? Okay. Just want to make sure.
I'm sorry. We're good.
It's all right.
It's at least, it's not as formal as like a TPZ or a council meeting, which it is a committee where we're all working together, but I just want to
No,
make
I
sure
hear
that
and
any,
see you perfectly. Yep. Thanks.
okay, good. Just want to make sure people heard Jonathan. Again, this is not for all of us in the room to participating, but make sure to hear it that, you know, residents who are interested, who want to come on and watch this afterwards can hear everything.
Yep. And does anyone else have any questions or thoughts about the future work of this body or any suggestions? Anything we want to bring up at this time?
No one has their hand raised.
Okay.
Fine.
All right,
Okay.
so staff will take it as the NRI is the priority right now, and
I think if each of us could, you know, just in the next month or two, like you said, kind of poke around and maybe.
Yeah.
Yep, I have,
throw
yep,
ideas.
I've got a couple of things I'll follow up on, CROG, and also the previous person, I can't remember what body it was that I talked to, and they said they would get back to me, and they didn't, so I'll follow up with them, and maybe if we paid our dues to that organization, they'll help us, but maybe that's not.
Maybe they
even-
will anyway.
Maybe it's not even an issue. Maybe they don't worry about the dues.
Sandy and I could do something with the Berlin Land Trust. And then are you gonna just approach Sonia and just see if there's?
yes, I can do that.
The grant writer, yeah.
Great. I think we can probably move on to the next item on the agenda, which is public comments.
Which we have no one on Zoom
No one
and
on Zoom, but.
You'll like
And I guess there must be a really like an important ball game on or something tonight. All right, and then back to committee member comments. So was there anything that anyone wanted to add at this time?
Mitch has his hand raised.
Thanks, Mitch.
Yeah, thanks. Just wanted to clarify next steps relative to the natural resource inventory. It's just to gather more information about, for example, CROG's possible participation, as well as maybe other towns who have engaged in something like this, and can we learn from them and maybe even partner up? Is that right?
yes,
Right, and maybe if there's like this Berlin Land Trust who actually presented to us a couple of years ago.
Right.
Maybe they would even help support this particular effort. I don't know if that's possible, but it doesn't hurt to ask, or, you know, if they've had steps or you know of other agencies or bodies that would help us. They seem to be very adept. They've done a lot.
Does Weathersfield
Right.
have a land trust?
I don't believe so.
You know, Rocky Hill or something, there's some kind of trust there. Because they might
Yeah,
be
I-
interested in
I
partnering
think-
with us as well.
Yeah, and I think all those ideas are great before we put together sort of, we don't know what to do next until I think we look at the resources, because I agree, I think with everyone here, we want to not assume the limited time and resources of our town staff who are so busy doing such important work. And if we can spread the wealth and utilize CROG resources or other folks through a team effort, that would be great. Thanks.
Absolutely. And it bolsters our decision-making process when we get to the point where something's on the agenda that we want to look at to acquire. This will be an important, you know, piece of, you know, support for that. Anyone else have any comments they want to make? Anyone? All right. Well,
Move to adjourn.
all in favor?
Do I need a second?
You don't need a second, I found out. I found that out. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
thank you
Thanks,
very much.
everybody.
It was actually, when did it come up? It came up a couple of weeks ago. Oh, it was, Steve Woods.
Woods, yep.
Steve Woods said,